Okay. Um, Cooking and baking are two different things. And what we're doing here is considered baking. And because of that, you have to be very accurate with your measurements. You have to be very accurate with the mixing, the mixing method that you use, and all of that. So if you're not careful with a baking recipe, then you're never going to get this to work out the way that you want it to. Baking is it is actually a science, and with that said, you have to be more accurate. That's why a lot of chefs don't like to bake, and it falls onto the pastry chefs usually because of that. With that said, I want you to take notice. I have on the table everything that I need. This is called getting our mise en place together. So I have all of my equipment, all of my ingredients, everything is right here, so that whenever I get started with this recipe, I don't have to be buzzing around the kitchen all over the place trying to find things. I already have everything here, ready to go. So I have my mixing bowl, I have a scrap bucket, I have a liquid measuring cup, I have my dry measuring cups right here, I have my measuring spoons that I need, and with the measuring spoons, you can tell which measuring spoons are what based on how they're labeled. If you notice, the big one has a TBS and the little one has a TSB. So that means that this is a tablespoon. Tablespoons are always going to have a B in them, and the teaspoon is not going to have that B in it. So that's always the smaller measuring spoon. So right there's my measuring spoons. I have something to crack my egg into. Have my bench scraper. Have a metal spatula and a rubber spatula. And then I have a fork, and I also have a pastry cutter. I'll explain that to you in a little bit here. So that's all my tools. I also have all my ingredients. My flour, and there's my baking powder, there's my sugar, salt, shortening, an egg, and the milk. All right, so I have everything here ready to go, and so I can just get started with my recipe. Now, the thing is that this usually wouldn't take any longer. If you have everything all together, it's going to take you about maybe 5-10 minutes to put this together, depending on how familiar you are with the recipe and the mixing method. It's going to take me a little bit longer than that, mainly because of the fact that I'm instructing on this. So, but whenever you go and get everything together, it's not going to take that long to put this together and to get it into the oven. That's why I'm saying this is the best way to do this. Get everything together first. Get your mise en place, French term for put in place, everything together. All right? And then after that, it's a piece of cake to put it all, mix it all together. Okay, so we're going to get started. I'm going to get my dry ingredients first. We're making biscuits, and actually this is called the biscuit method of mixing. So that's kind of appropriate. So the first thing I want to do is I want to get my flour. All right, and I need 2.5 cups of flour. The recipe is going to be put onto the screen at some point here. And what I want to do is I want to fluff up my flour a little bit. I don't want to pack flour down. And then before I put any flour into my bowl, I'm just going to level this off. So that's 1 cup, and I'm using my dry measuring spoons or measuring cups right now to do this. I don't use a liquid measuring cup to measure dry ingredients. I don't use a dry measuring cup to measure liquid ingredients. You're not going to get an accurate measurement if you do something like that. So this way, everything's all accurate. So there's my flour. Okay. So now I need my baking powder and my sugar. Okay, and I need a tablespoon of both of those. So I'll start with my baking powder. Again, I heap it up. And then I level it off and put it in my bowl. Okay. Same with my sugar. Heap it up. Level it off. Put it in your bowl. And if you notice, I'm not measuring things right over top of where my ingredients are that I've already measured out. Reason I'm not doing that is because if you actually do have some sort of spillover, then you're going to have more ingredients in your mixing bowl than what you need, and that could mess up your recipe. So just be careful with that. Okay, and now my salt. I need a half a teaspoon of salt. Do the same thing. Level it off and then put it in. Alright, so I have all my dry ingredients in my bowl right now. I haven't put in any kind of wet ingredients yet. Alright, that's all you want to put in here is your dry ingredients. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to put in my shortening. Alright, so I need a half a cup of shortening. I'm going to use my rubber spatula to measure the shortening out. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my spatula and I'm just going to sort of press that down into the measuring cup. Alright, that way I don't get a lot of air bubbles in there, and the measuring cup is pretty much full of shortening instead of having shortening and air. Alright, you want to have it as much as measured as accurately as possible with as little air in there. The other way that you can measure out the shortening is by weighing it out on one of the digital scales. It would be 4 ounces for a half a cup, and that will measure it out exactly right. Alright, but this is another way that you can do it. And then what you do is you take the shortening and you just scrape it out of there with your spatula. Okay, try to get as much out as possible. Alright. Alright. So now I have my shortening in there and all my dry ingredients. What I want to do next is I want to cut my shortening up into the flour. This is not something that's going to be a smooth mixture. It's going to be something that is a lumpy mixture, and that's what you want. The reason why you want a lumpy mixture is because you want to create little balls of shortening, little pieces of shortening in that flour, and then once you put in your milk and your egg, your liquid ingredients in there, it's going to create a dough that's lumpy. Whenever it goes into the oven, those lumps of shortening that you've created are going to bake off and steam off in the oven with the heat of the oven. And And that's going to create pockets between your dough. And that's what makes a flaky biscuit. And that's what you want in a biscuit, is a tender, flaky product. So that's how you create that, and that's why baking is a science, is because of stuff like that. That's definitely scientific. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use my fork, and I'm going to cut my shortening up into the flour. Okay, the other thing that you can use to do this with is the pastry cutter. So this right here you can use and do the same thing. Me, myself, I kind of like the fork better. I don't know why, but I feel that the fork is better. But you know what? I think it's all what you grew up with or something, because that's just what I'm comfortable with. But this is what you end up with, is a flaky, like a lumpy mixture of flour and shortening. Okay? And you want the shortening pieces to be about the size of peas. That's good. Okay, now that we have our flour and the shortening mixed up, I'm going to make like a little well here, just a little hole in my mixture. And I'm going to add my egg and my milk. Okay, again, I have this little pan here, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to crack my egg into here. I have my scrap bucket to put my shell in, so I'm keeping everything all nice and neat. As you can see, I don't have a huge mess here. It's pretty neat. And the reason why I crack an egg into here first and then put it into my mixture is because I don't want eggshells. If I had eggshells in here, I could fish those out. The other thing is that if this egg were a bad egg, then if I'm directly, plopping it right directly into there, then you're going to ruin your whole mixture. Where if it's bad and it's in here, you can just throw it out. So right there's my egg. And then I'm going to measure my milk with the liquid measuring cup. And I need a cup of milk. What I'm going to do is I'm going to get down at eye level to see where my milk is, and right now I have just a little bit more milk than what I need. All right, but a lot of times you can't see that unless you get down to eye level to look. Okay, and that's good right there. Okay. Yeah, up here it looks like it was a cup, and whenever I get down to eye level, it wasn't a cup. It was a little over a cup, and you don't want that. So now I put my milk in here. Again, use a liquid measuring cup to measure out your liquid ingredients. The liquid measuring cups are always the ones with the pour spout, so you pour liquids. That's how you can remember to use this measuring cup instead of these measuring cups for liquid measurement. You're not going to get as accurate of a measurement if you're using these as you are with the liquid measuring cup. Alright, and this dough is going to be a sticky dough. That's the way it's made to be. So I'm going to mix this up. And you just mix this only until everything is incorporated. Because you definitely don't want this smooth, and it's not going to be smooth because you've created lumps on purpose. then right there you have a nice biscuit dough mix. And as you can see, it's sticky. That's the way it's supposed to be. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to clean up everything and get ready to roll my dough out. So that means that I'm going to get rid of all my ingredients and everything and just keep the equipment that I need. So I'll be back. Okay, so now that I'm ready to roll out my biscuit dough, what I have here is my bench scraper that I had before, and you'll see what that's used for. I have my biscuit cutter. I still have my flour here. I have a rolling pin. I still have my rubber spatula, and I have a pan here with some parchment paper on it. All right, so what I'm going to do first is I'm going to put down some flour. Now, you're going to put down a little bit more flour than what you usually put down for other products, mainly because this dough is a pretty sticky dough and you don't want it sticking to the table. So, and then I'm going to use my rubber spatula to just turn this dough right over onto the table. Alright, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to put some flour on there too, so that my hands don't get completely messed up with stickiness. Okay. All right, and I usually try to put it into a round shape because what I'm cutting out is round. Then I'm going to use my rolling pin to roll this out some. Okay, so I'm going to start in the middle. I always start in the middle, and I'm going to roll out from the middle all directions. It's not going to take a lot of pressure to roll this dough out because it's a really soft dough, and you don't want to get it too thin. You want this to be about a ½ inch, maybe 3/4 of an inch thick. Okay, so like that. You can always shrink it up a little bit if you need to. All right, and you can use either side of this. I'm going to use the plain side, and I'm just going to cut my biscuits out. I can place them pretty close together on my baking sheet because these biscuits will rise up, but they're not going to spread out. So, you know, you can put them, you can even have them touching and it won't matter. But anyway, I cut out as many as I can on the first time. That way I don't have to worry about rolling this dough out and creating more gluten as I go, because for as many times as you mess with this dough, then you're creating more and more gluten as you go along. So, and the gluten is what is in the flour that's elastic, that holds things together, but you don't want a lot of that to be in this particular dough. You need a little bit of it, but you don't want to make it too much, because then the biscuits will just be tough. And I'm going to roll that out again. Again, trying to keep as consistent with the thickness as possible with what I did before. I think I can only get 2 out of that one. All right. And since it's such a small amount of dough this time, I'm not even going to use the rolling pin. I'm just going to sort of pat it out and cut one out like that. And then I'm going to take this other little piece of dough and just pat it into biscuit shape and put it on there like that. All right, these are ready to go into the oven now. To clean up things, what I'm going to do is I'm going to use my bench scraper and scrape off anything that was stuck to the table. If your dough, if you didn't use enough flour and your dough stuck to the table, you can always use the bench scraper to scrape the dough up and gather it up together a little bit. But the bench scraper is really good for cleaning up things. Now, the bench scraper and your biscuit cutter can go through the dishwasher, no problem. This rolling pin though, do not put this through the dishwasher, do not put it through the pot sink. Just wipe it off with a soapy cloth and a sanitation rag. There's ball bearings in here that make it so that if it gets water in it, then it will rust the ball bearings and ruin the rolling pin. And a rolling pin is wooden, so if you soak this too much, it's gonna swell and split and splinter, and then the rolling pin's no good. So just wipe them off and then put them away. All right, so that's the biscuits for the moment. I'll come back with the baked biscuits to show you afterwards. Here are the biscuits that I made, and they are literally straight out of the oven, so they are warm, but I'll put on some gloves to show you some things here. Okay, so the biscuits are nice and browned on the top, and if I tear one open, then it's all nice and flaky inside, and it's baked all inside too. So if it was gooey inside, you'd want to keep it in the oven for a little bit longer. So right there is your finished product. If you get a chance to make these at home, then go ahead and send me a picture of them and tell me what your experience was like in making the biscuits. I'd love to hear from you. So until next time, see you later.